Will the city of Houston ever get an NHL hockey team, and what are the most likely scenarios and how it could happen? Would it be through NHL expansion, or could it be through relocation? Ever since the city of Seattle has been announced for their new franchise, along with the Coyotes moving to the Central Division, there's been a lot of chatter about Houston and how it could work and how it could happen. We'll discuss that scenario coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, lately NHL expansion has been a hot topic of discussion around the league, where they recently announced the city of Seattle has been granted an NHL expansion franchise to get started here in 2021-22 NHL season. So obviously, as we build on the anticipation of that team coming in and having a balanced league of 16 teams in each conference, there's been a lot of other chatter lately around other potential landing spots for the NHL for future either relocation or expansion. During the NHL expansion announcement event for the Seattle group, Gary Bettman, along with Bill Daly and others, conducted many interviews and were asked many questions around the expansion process and around other cities, future expansion, etc. They kind of seemed like they weren't completely closed to the idea of the NHL expanding in the future, but this was kind of all they were looking at for the short term, for the time being at least. They didn't have any other future plans to really say they would expand at all, and if so, they didn't want to get into locations or anything of that nature. So, I mean, although we have discussed the possibilities before about the NHL being bigger than a 32-team league, I do think it could work. We haven't seen any of the pro sports leagues do it as of yet, but it certainly is a possibility. So we could very well see them get bigger than that. We've also discussed the possibility of them maybe expanding into Europe and how that would work as well. But of course, that's a whole topic here for another day. Right now, I want to talk about Houston because there seems to be a huge appetite for hockey in Houston. Now, of course, that city does have a lot of history with hockey, just not in the NHL here as of yet. They've had teams from many other leagues, including the Houston Aeros, that were there for a long time. And based on what I see on social media, there does seem to be a lot of local people that are very, very interested in the NHL coming to town and setting up an NHL franchise there. Regardless of how they go about it, they don't really seem to care. They just want hockey in their city. Of course, there's a natural rival there already with the Dallas Stars for the interstate rival in the state of Texas, so that could certainly work as well. And really, ever since, like I said, Seattle was announced the team, the Coyotes moving to the Central, there's been a lot more recent buzz around Houston. And to spur that along, there was another news report from Fox News as well. So first of all, I just want to get into a little bit of quick history for those of you who may not be up to speed on Houston and how it could all work. NHL to Houston really caught life and really got a lot more media attention about a little over a year ago when the owner of the Houston Rockets, Tillman Fertitta, who has got all kinds of money, owns the Rockets, has a building, put this out on Twitter. I'll put it up on the screen and I'll read it here to you. His tweet says here, as I've mentioned before, I'm very interested in the possibility of bringing the NHL to Houston, but it will have to be a deal that works for my organization, the city, the fans of the NHL through the region, and the NHL Board of Governors. We are in a very early stage of evaluating what opportunities may exist, but look forward to a thorough process. And that was on November 16th of 2017. So as I mentioned, just a little bit over 1 year ago. Now, of course, that tweet does not say he's looking into expansion. This says he's looking into opportunities. Now, as we know, the NHL is not overly keen on moving franchises. It's not something we see, very often. Gary Bettman is pretty stubborn, especially in cities where he's had a major hand in helping the teams move there, like the Coyotes, for example. They've tried everything they can to keep that team where it is in the state of Arizona, but it is having some difficulties. And until they get a long-term arena worked out, you're still going to hear chatter around that being the most likely franchise. Now, it's not the only franchise. When you see on social media, I know people in Houston watch a lot of other cities closely to see potential, fallings out or things that could lead them to having that team maybe need to relocate. I see it all the time, especially on my Twitter feed, saying, well, maybe this team's in trouble, maybe that team's in trouble. So I also wanted to discuss some of these cities that I don't really think are really in any danger of moving. But NHL fans in Houston, my message to you is this. I do think there's a possibility you're going to get a team, and it could happen in the short term. And if it does happen in the short term, it would be only if and when the Arizona Coyotes were forced to relocate. That would be the most logical destination that would make the most sense for the NHL to go to. As we've seen, there's an owner with deep pockets that are, ready to take on a team. They have a building, there's a location. Like, there's not a lot of work that would need to be done to bring them in. Now, of course, there's plenty of other cities besides Arizona that we've heard some scuttlebutt around possibly moving. We've seen the New York Islanders, for example. As we know, the Islanders really aren't working out well in Brooklyn and Barclays Center, but they do appear to have everything in lined up for a new arena to remain in Long Island, so I really don't see that franchise going anywhere. I've seen different times on social media talking about a couple of the Canadian teams, like the Calgary Flames, the Ottawa Senators. Both of those teams are trying to work hard to get new arenas in place, and so far they've had a lot of struggles and difficulties to make that happen. Now, just because they're trying to get a new arena and having difficulties, it doesn't mean the team's going to move. Both of those franchises are doing relatively well, especially the Flames. I don't think the Flames are in any danger of going anywhere. In regards to Ottawa, yes, Eugene Melnyk as an owner is unstable, but there's been plenty of interest in rich people buying that team and keeping it there, and I don't think that the NHL is at all interested in moving the Senators outside of Ottawa at all. So I really don't think they're in any danger as well. And same thing with the Florida Panthers. As much as you watch their games and you see low attendance and all kinds of empty seats, based on the arena lease and how everything's working in Florida, they're still doing okay, even considering the low attendance. And because of the lease and everything that is going on with that team, I don't see them moving for quite some time. Now, could I see it in the future? I really could, unless things turn around. But I think it would be a number of years before that would ever happen. Now, the other big thing to consider here is that for the first time in a long time, the NHL is going to have a balanced league with even number of teams in the conferences. So if a team in the East did have to relocate, I would not suspect Houston would be the first landing spot. They would likely go to Quebec City, who's also has a building, has an ownership group. They're also ready, willing, and able as well. Now, it's going to be very difficult for Quebec City to ever get an expansion team for a couple reasons. One, the Board of Governors seems reluctant to vote on it to go there. But secondly, if you look at the cost, everything we talk about in the NHL is in US dollars. Of course, Quebec City is in Canada, so everything would have to be converted from US dollars to Canadian dollars. And the Canadian dollar not being in the greatest shape compared to the greenback, that poses a big problem for that group in Quebec. Even though they're a very wealthy group and have lots of money, we're talking about getting close to $1 billion Canadian to make that happen. And if you look at what Seattle's going to pay $650, the next one's likely going to be more again. If it starts getting up to around $700-800 million, you convert that over to Canadian funds, we're talking about $1 billion or more. That's not going to happen. But if they could buy a struggling franchise, for maybe $400 to $500 million and move it to Canada, that is something that would remain a possibility. So I do think that for moving forward, if teams do have to move at all, if they're in the East, they would likely go to Quebec City. If they're in the West, Houston makes the most logical choice. And obviously, like I said, with the Arizona Coyotes moving to the Central, this has really fueled a fire that long-term, they're going to end up in Houston before they ever have to move. And this is just kind of a precursor to make that transition a lot easier. And you know what? I don't have any information to suggest that that's definitely going to happen. But there was this news story, like I mentioned here, from a Fox News reporter who put this information on Twitter, and I'll put this up on the screen. Mark Berman on Twitter here for Fox News says, NHL sources, Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta has met with NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman about the potential of bringing the NHL to Houston. Fertitta has had preliminary talks about buying and relocating the Arizona Coyotes to Houston. Nothing of that happening now. No decisions closed. When contacted by Fox 26 Sports, Fertitta declined comment, as did Rockets CEO Tad Brown. Well, of course, they're not going to publicly acknowledge a whole lot of this stuff because obviously it's not something that would be able to be made public. It'd be behind the scenes. But could this information be true? Could the Houston Rockets be inquiring to the NHL? Would not surprise me at all. It's been over a year since they've expressed interest in bringing a team to Houston. They certainly have the funds to do so. Like I said, everything's in place, really. It would not be a difficult transition. And we've also had a story which I reported on here not that long back. I'll link the video in the description in case you missed it. The report came from Dave Pagnotta of the Fourth Period, indicating that he had sources indicating that the Arizona Coyotes were for sale and that they were likely closing on a deal soon. Now, we had information at that point suggesting that when the NHL Board of Governors had their meeting, which just happened where they approved Seattle, that could be a topic of discussion on the same Board of Governors meeting. Now, of course, things never moved far enough along to make that happen to be a point of discussion. But of course, the league would have to approve any sale from one owner to another. So basically, like any owner would have to be accepted into the league as an NHL owner. So, we're not quite at that stage as of yet. But we had information from Arizona So we had information suggesting the Coyotes were for sale either for the full part of the team or at least enough to be a majority owner. We also had enough information here, obviously, that we know, which is confirmed, suggesting that the Coyotes are moving to the Central Division when Seattle comes into play. And now we have Fox News reporting that Dylan Fertitta's having meetings with Gary Bettman to inquire about buying that team and moving them to Houston. So we're not likely going to get any kind of confirmation for any time soon here out of the league or the Rockets owner or anything like that. I really think it would be a matter of like a long time here before we really have anything confirmed, just because they're not going to say anything until it's far enough along and something officially would be going down. But could the Arizona Coyotes relocate to Houston and bring a team to that great city, one of the largest markets in the U.S. that does not have NHL hockey? I really do think it is quite the possibility, and it would not surprise me at all. Now, of course, the Coyotes are not even the only team in the state of Arizona that are threatening to relocate. I mean, even their basketball team and their baseball team are also looking for new homes as well, and are threatening to move should they not be able to, have any good solutions there in place. I mean, even seen a case of the Phoenix Suns basketball team possibly talking about heading to Seattle. As we know, the city of Seattle has a history with basketball, and with the new arena going up for Key Arena for their hockey team, they would certainly like to have a joint tenant and get the NBA back there as well. So it's certainly another possibility about other teams in Arizona potentially leaving that great state. So we'll see what happens here, but I do think if the NHL goes to Houston, if it's going to happen anytime soon at all, it would make the most sense for the Coyotes to go to Houston. If they have to wait for NHL expansion, I'm not sure if or when that's ever going to come. And considering it's going to be at least 2021 before Seattle jumps into the league, I would think it's going to be at least a few more years beyond that they would end up possibly expanding again. Of course, if the NHL did expand again, it would make sense that they expand it by multiple teams so they don't have that imbalance again. I mean, obviously, Houston and Quebec City are the main North American markets that would make the most sense, that are ready for teams. But then, yes, the conferences would be even, but it would be odd numbers. Not sure how the NHL would feel about that, but it certainly would be a possibility. But I think it would be at least a few more years down the road before they'd want to entertain that. And then we're probably looking at 2024, 25 or something way into the future before hockey would ever arrive in those markets. And like I said as well, I do have a lot of concerns that Quebec City could really take on an expansion franchise. It'd just be way too expensive for them. I do have every bit of confidence that hockey in Quebec City could be very successful. I don't see any reason why they couldn't be as equally successful as the Jets organization in Winnipeg. They're similar sized markets. I know the arena would be sold out all the time. So I think it would work and be very successful. It's just the upfront money to get that expansion team. It makes more sense that it would have to be through relocation. Now, from the Houston side of it, I think they could afford expansion. But again, I also think it makes more sense for relocation as well. As like I said, the Coyotes are struggling to find a new home, and they're really the only franchise that I think there's any possibility on them moving. Now, of course, if you're a Coyotes fan, I don't want you coming on here saying that I think they're moving, or I'm saying they're moving, or they're not, they're going to be leaving. I don't have information to suggest that. I'm just saying that of all the NHL teams, that team is the one who's the most likely, based on their scenario, that they don't have a long-term arena situation that works, and the team has been struggling financially to boot as well, and there is confirmation that the team is for sale. So you put all that together, and it makes sense that a move to Houston when they move to the Central would certainly be a possibility. So make sure you leave some comments down below. Let me know what are your thoughts on the NHL going to Houston, and what is the most likely way they end up getting there. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up before you go as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.